London. Let's do this.
Welcome to the 2025 London Marathon. This is one of the premier 26.2-mile races in the entire world, and today we have a very, very special competition on our hands. Because for this marathon, we have the legend himself, Eliud Kipchoge, looking to win his 5th London title. But standing in his way is one of the deepest fields ever assembled, including the Paris Olympic champion Tamirat Tola, including the half-marathon world record holder Jacob Kiplimo, and for many, the pre-race favorite is also looking to run super quick, Sebastian Sawe from Kenya. Now for today's race, the weather is almost ideal, as the conditions at the start are right around 48 degrees Fahrenheit. There's also practically no chance of rain, and the wind was also cooperating, as it was practically non-existent. The conditions really were quite optimal for a great marathon here, and with 10 different men going into this race with personal records under 2 hours and 5 minutes, the odds of a quick time going down in London were very high. And some were even calling for the course record of Kelvin Kiptum to be challenged, as he dropped a legendary time of 2:01:25 back in 2023. However, given that the opening half marathon is scheduled to go out in around 61 minutes and 15 seconds, this does seem close to impossible, because that would mean they would have to negative split this marathon in a pretty huge way. However, there is still a chance to see a very special clocking in London. So without further ado, let's head to the roads and see how this race unfolded. For the opening stages of this marathon, it was apparent that this field was going for a super fast time, and over the opening 5 kilometers, they passed through in 14 minutes and 25 seconds. This equates to a pace of 4 minutes and 38 seconds per mile, or 2 minutes and 53 seconds per kilometer, meaning that if they held this pace to the finish, they would hit a time of right around 2:01:30, just 5 seconds outside of Kelvin Kiptum's course record. This was a very promising start for this historically deep field, and then through the 10-kilometer split, it was practically the exact same pace, as the leaders hit a time of 28 minutes and 57 seconds, meaning that after their opening 14:25, they then proceeded to run a time of 14:32. Now, notably, Eliud Kipchoge was still holding very strong at the front of this pack. And this is quite notable, because if he were to take this victory, he would become the GOAT of London, winning this race 5 times. However, this pace also put him on the world record tempo for the Masters division, as he just turned 40 years old last year. And the Masters world record for the marathon is held by none other than Kenenisa Bekele, and he actually set that time in last year's London Marathon. And at this point in the race, Kipchoge was still running right at 2:02 pace, so he was certainly on for a very quick clocking. This means the race for Kipchoge and the Masters record was officially on. However, there were still about 10 other runners running right next to him, so taking the victory in this race was going to be a huge task for the 40-year-old Kenyan. Now, over on the women's side, it pretty quickly turned into a 3 or 4 woman race, as by the 10K split, the front 4 runners passed through in 31:16. Now, this was a blazing pace, as it put them at an estimated finish of right under 2 hours and 12 minutes, which means they would be running just outside of world record tempo, and they would be running definitely on the course record. And given that the gold and silver medalists from the Paris Olympics, Sifan Hassan and Tigst Assefa, were still running in the front group at this point, next to anything was possible on the women's side. Back over on the men's side, they passed through the half-marathon split with a time of 1 hour, 1 minute, and 30 seconds, meaning their projected finish was now 2 hours and 3 minutes flat. And right in the front of this lead pack was still Eliud Kipchoge, looking strong, looking smooth, and he was still looking quite effortless at this split. Now, this field was still very dense at this point, so it was likely that there was going to be a big break coming over the second half. And even if we go all the way up to 30 kilometers on the men's side, some 75% through this race, this field was still full of so many great runners. and they hit this split in 1 hour, 27 minutes, and 47 seconds. And still, Kipchoge was still looking absolutely great up front. This was honestly quite the shock to me. Usually, with about 10 kilometers left in a major marathon, the fields usually break down to about 3 or 4 athletes looking for the victory. But in this year's London race, there were still so many athletes in contention for the win. And just when I was thinking that 10 or more athletes were going to make it to 40 kilometers, it happened. And it happened in a huge way, because just after 30 kilometers, a massive move went down, and it completely blew open this year's London Marathon. Just after 30K, Sebastian Sawe from Kenya said that he had enough, and from 30 kilometers up to 35K, he dropped a 5K split of 13:56. Dropping a sub-14-minute 5K in the later stages of a marathon is just something that we rarely see, and this is definitely reminiscent of the kind of surge that Kelvin Kiptum would drop over the second half. And while this 5K split was pretty crazy, the one single split that really blew open this race was what Sawe did for his 20th mile, because according to the announcers and the field operators, he dropped a 20th mile in 4 minutes and 18 seconds, which does sound incredible, but it is possible that this split was mismeasured, because we actually saw the exact same thing back in 2023 when Kiptum broke the world record. And this 4:18 measured mile was actually the result of a technical error, and it did seem too good to be true at the time, but either way, Sawe was absolutely moving, and this 5-kilometer split really did blow open the field, because just look at what happened to the top 10 on the men's side over the previous 5 kilometers, and as you can see, Kipchoge was now officially out of contention for the victory. But he was still right on pace to attack the Masters world record, as his projected finish was right around 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 10 seconds, which would place him 5 seconds ahead of Bekele's world record. Over on the women's side, it quickly evolved into a 2-woman race, and these 2 women were actually Tigist Assefa and Jepkoske from Kenya, as Hassan had simply not been able to follow after passing through the opening half in 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 40 seconds. This battle was amazing, but right at 23 miles, Assefa threw down a huge mile in 5 minutes and 3 seconds, dropping Jepkoske by a pretty significant amount, and Jepkoske really was struggling for the final 10 kilometers. This move proved to be the decisive moment of this year's London Marathon, and after a very impressive final 5K in 16 minutes and 30 seconds, Assefa took a pretty massive win here by almost 3 minutes, winning this year's London race in 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 50 seconds, which was actually a new women's-only world record, which again makes Assefa one of the primary marathon athletes in the world right now. This put Assefa 2 minutes and 56 seconds ahead of Jepkoske in second. And finishing in third was Safwan Hassan with a very impressive 2 hour and 18-minute performance. And this was a very quick race on the women's side. However, if we head back over to the men's race, it was all Sebastian Sawe. By 40 kilometers, Sawe had more than 45 seconds on the second-placed athlete Jacob Kiplimo, and with a 5K split of 14:20 from 35 kilometers to 40K, he was at a new projected finish of 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 40 seconds. This officially meant that the course record of Kelvin Kiptum was now completely out of reach, but the prospects of breaking 2:03 were looking more and more promising as every mile continued. Now, over the final few kilometers, Sebastian Sawe only pulled more and more away from this field, and for his bold move at 30 kilometers and his world-class strength over the final 10K, he was rewarded as the 2025 London Marathon champion, crossing the line in 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 27 seconds, officially making him the second fastest London finisher of all time, surpassing Kipchoge's previous course record in 2:02:37. Now, finishing in second with a very impressive marathon debut was Jacob Kiplimo from Uganda, who finished second in 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 37 seconds. And the race for third was super close, as Alexander Matiso and Abde Nagie battled all the way to the tape, but by the smallest of margins. I'm talking down to 1/10 of a second. Matiso took the final podium placement in 2:04:20. And finishing in fifth was Tamirat Tola, followed closely by Kipchoge, who finished in sixth in 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 25 seconds. 1 minute and 10 seconds behind Bekele's Masters World Record, but this was a solid day on the roads for Kipchoge, who has officially bounced back from his disappointing 2024 Paris Marathon. The 2025 London Marathon was an amazing race with world-class times across the board, and we might be seeing a brand new rivalry emerging on the men's side, as Sebastian Sawe displayed his dominance, but with an incredible debut. I think Jacob Kiplimo has huge potential, and many people are calling for him to be the athlete to officially break 2 in a legal marathon. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, until next time.